Welcome back to the kitchen! So something recently that I started doing is whenever I go into like a thrift store or a bookstore, I want to see what kind of cookbooks they had, mostly because I'm not the best cook, as evidenced by the last video. Do you know that like Fallout 4 has like an official cookbook? That's so bizarre to me. So on one of my Goodwill trips, I found this, the TBS Superstation Dinner and a Movie Cookbook. This cookbook is from 1999 and has a bunch of recipes based on movies around the 80s and 90s. So I figured what's a better return into cooking videos than something that also makes me review a movie. It has a bunch of different recipes based on their movies, each with a cool little pun in the title, and honestly, this is probably a book that we're going to be going back to a lot. But today, we're going to be looking at Back to the Future. The Back to the Future recipe in the book is the traveling through time and onion tart. I'm gonna be honest, the only reason I picked this recipe was because I just watched all 3 Back to the Futures recently, so I have enough that I can talk about it off the cuff. I wasn't actually expecting to be baking. I thought this was going to be an actual recipe. Uh-oh! I'm being honest, I don't know what a tart is really supposed to look like, and there are no actual illustrations in the book at all. So we're going to be going on this journey together while also reviewing the Back to the Future trilogy completely off the cuff, just based on a bunch of notes I had. This video could be a wreck. So if you want to follow along at home, either find your own version of the book, or I'll post the recipe in the description so that you can go along with it. So to make the traveling through time and onion tart, here's what you'll need. A puff pastry, brown sugar, a white onion, 2 red onions, salt, pepper, egg, Parmesan cheese, artichoke heart, thyme, and some red wine that the recipe book says should be Beaujolais. I ain't French, but we're drinking wine today. So the first step of this before we actually follow the recipe is preparing our ingredients, so let's get started. So first we need our white onion diced and our red onion sliced in order to add to whatever mixture we're doing for this tart. I'm being honest, I'm not 100% sure how to dice it perfectly, so I'm going off of what I saw Gordon Ramsay do a while ago. So anyway, while I'm doing this, let's talk Back to the Future. The wonderful thing about Back to the Future is that it is a way better movie than it has any right to be, really. Like, it is hilarious. The performances are all magical. But the art of filmmaking is so beautiful in that movie that you don't even really notice it. I almost forget it almost every time I watch, just how magnificently the movie is set up and how well it's shot and edited and everything about it. Everything in 1985 is meant to beat down the McFly family, especially Marty.
Notice your band is on the roster for the dance auditions after school today. Why even bother, McFly? You don't have a chance. You're too much like your old man. No McFly ever amounted to anything in the history of Hill Valley.
Like, the movie starts with this really elaborate long take of a breakfast machine. And that's the thing, the long takes never stop. It's half the reason why I think Back to the Future works so well. The long takes force the actors to really focus and nail their performance. If there's even a little quirk, they have to live with it. And I think it's what adds to the personality of the movie. I'm one of the few that unironically thinks Marty McFly is like a really, really, really cool person. I know he's supposed to be this nerd, but I never understood that. He's just legitimately cool. Maybe that says more about me than anything. So all these long takes together just force the actors to really have to understand who their characters are because they really need to embody it in every scene. It's what makes all the conversations elevated over what you'd expect from a regular movie. Like, picture any of the modern day comedy movies where they just let funny actors riff for a while. Most of the shots are just shot reverse shot because the actors need to speak. Like, the actors need to be able to improv. They don't want anything else. They need to think their jokes. They need to improv on the spot. You compare it to something like Back to the Future where everything's methodically shot. Everybody has to hit their marks in order to get every single aspect of the movie down. The scene with Marty and Doc Brown in 1955 going through the school is masterful. They walk through the school with students, without students, with students walking through, which everybody needs to be placed in order to do that. That's a really hard shot to pull off. And they even use the environment to help tell the story. That's how Marty remembers the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, by seeing the giant banner for it. And it's in a completely different area of the school set, and it's all foreshadowed in the very first shot with the breakfast machine. Haven't cried yet, that's good. Onions usually make me cry. I didn't peel these nearly as well as I thought I did. Oopsies. I really wish I had a breakfast machine so I wouldn't have to deal with this cooking. This is a lot of onion, so when it said when it said medium onion, I hope this is good enough. When they said medium onion, I hope this is enough onion. This is a lot of onion, and I guess I'm making a whole tart. This is normal, right? So this is our chopped white onion. This is a lot of it. I'm gonna put it in a bowl because I think it all goes. I think we're gonna cook it soon, but it says thinly diced, but I don't know how thin I can make this shit. I'm bad at cooking, and this is me learning. Everything is falling. No. There must have been a better way to do this, and everything's just falling off. Alright, these are our chopped white onions. Now we need to do the reds. I'll get a bigger bowl for the reds. This is a lot of onions for this thing. I hope I have enough time to go along with it. Anyway, Back to the Future. It's a storytelling masterpiece. My teachers have literally used this movie to show setup and payoff in filmmaking, and I've never seen a movie to this day handle that better than Back to the Future. Literally everything that happens in the movie gets called back to at least once in some way. So it just feels so much more satisfying when you see it happen. God, I hope this tart tastes good. Don't cut like I do. I'm probably cutting it like a dumbass. There's some sliced onions to go along with our diced. Still gotta do one more. Next time, I'm definitely choosing a better recipe that doesn't just call for, like, this much fucking onion. Because I'm not wrong, this is a lot of onion, right? For any recipe? So you learn all of... Logan? I'm dog sitting for the weekend, by the way. Got this good boy acting as a sous chef. This is a lot of onions. We don't need this many onions, I would like to think, ever, in any dish. Alright, so now we gotta chop our thyme, and then we can get to the actual making of this tart. How much of this would be 1 tablespoon? How much is a tablespoon of this stuff? I'm gonna go out on a limb and say the one that says tablespoon is the tablespoon. So I just need enough to fill about that much. So let's do that. Thyme smells funky. Now that we have everything started, I think we can start the actual cooking process, yo. So step 1 of this recipe is to actually make the filling. Heat the olive oil and butter in a large skillet over medium heat. Add the sliced onions and brown sugar to cook for 15 minutes, stirring often. Add the red wine and increase the heat to medium-high. Continue cooking for about 10 minutes until the wine is completely evaporated and the onions have the consistency of thick marmalade. Stir in thyme, season to taste with salt and pepper, set aside to cool. So I guess, let's get started. Alright, so it says to set it to medium. So what we need is 2 tablespoons of olive oil. You know, the ingredients don't actually say to have butter, but it's a good thing I just happen to have butter. I guess everybody has butter in their fridge. I don't know how much butter to use because it doesn't say, so I'll say that's enough. This is also supposed to have half a cup of the red wine. So let's get our red wine on. This is what they mean by half a cup, right? Booyah! Half a cup for them. And a full cup for me. I'm not usually a red guy, but this is delicious. Alright, so now we need to add our onions and our sugar into this. That's a lot of onions. And a teaspoon of sugar. Yeah, that I'm already feeling like I'm messing this up. So while that's going, Back to the Future. Something magical about Back to the Future is that no matter how many times you have seen it, it's somehow always as magical as your first time. It can be anything from you understanding more of the story to something you've never seen in the background before, and all of it is set up and pay off perfectly. Especially with the way the long takes all sort of take you on a ride with the characters, you sort of come up with the information just at the same time as they do. And honestly, the age of it kind of helps. Like, it's an 80s movie with a 50s period piece in it. And because part of it is set in the 80s, that stuff just comes off as like super retro now, so you really get it feels like a period piece on two fronts, if that makes sense. No matter how many times I've watched the movie, I'm still on the edge of my seat. The main theme is so uplifting, so heroic, that you can't help but just celebrate along with it. It's like the Jaws theme, how that music just perfectly represents that sort of emotion. The Back to the Future theme sort of does that same thing. All of the actors also sell this movie along with the great cinematography. Christopher Lloyd does such a crazy job as Doc Brown that I feel like no one else could fulfill the role. I don't think even he can fulfill the role the way he used to back in the day. He has such a manic energy just bouncing off the walls of the set, and the fact that the character also is followed by the camera work, it just helps nail how eccentric his character is. Michael J. Fox also does an incredible job. I know that the movie's supposed to say that Marty McFly is a bit of a dork like the rest of the McFly family, but unironically, he's just so fucking cool. I love his jacket, I love the way he speaks, I love just the way he handles situations. He's cool. He's unironically cool, and how dare the movie say he's not cool? It's like the one bad thing about it. I honestly have to say, Back to the Future is one of the most perfect movies ever put on a technical standpoint, on a storytelling standpoint, even on a performance standpoint, music everything about the movie is so well done and so well executed. That's just one of the best movies ever made. Also, Johnny Be Good. Johnny Be Good. And the relationship between Doc Brown and Marty is a very interesting one that helps Marty grow, and I didn't really notice that until this viewing of it. Marty cares immensely about what everyone in the world thinks of him. He already counts himself out because he doesn't believe he can do it, because everybody else has already told him that he won't amount to anything. Then there's Doc Brown, who everybody says almost the exact same stuff, but he doesn't give a fuck. Alright, any minute now I should be adding the wine to it. This is delicious wine. And let's add our wine. Alright, and this is where we also throw in the thyme and some salt and pepper. And time to throw in the thyme. It feels like such a small amount of thyme compared to the amount of onion. We still have like 5 minutes left in the timer, so I hope this is what it's supposed to be, because I may have cut these too thick to actually cook well.
Here's your reminder. Check the onions.
That's why having Alexa is good. So, I don't know what marmalade is supposed to look like, but I'm gonna assume it's that. Okay, now that step 1 is done, let's look at step 2. Time to form the tart. Place a large cookie sheet on a rack in the lower third of the onion and preheat it to 425. Lay out the pastry sheet flat on the lightly floured surface. Gently roll the dough to a 10-inch square, dusting with a little bit of flour to avoid sticking. Transfer the dough to a well-buttered sheet of aluminum foil. Okay, so while we're messing with whatever we're gonna do here, the oven needs to preheat to 425, and I think my oven takes a while to do that, so let's just set that now. Okay, so we need to flour this up so that we can get this thing. It says we need to get it to about 10-ish inches. So let's lightly flour all of this. I'm getting flashbacks to the Captain Crunch. Oh my god, what did I buy? Okay, so I don't know if I need all of this. Do I? This is a 10-inch square. This is so much more than 10 inches. I wasn't expecting this. I thought it was going to be like a small kind of, you know? Because I don't have like a rolling pin or anything. I'm going to be just using the artichoke hearts. In fact, I don't think I need to, because I think this is 10 inches. I think this is enough. So I'm going to do one where I flattened it out and one where I didn't. Oh god, who let me bake? This is stressful. So let's just see what we need exactly. Oh yeah, I was supposed to beat an egg with a tablespoon of water. Oops. So let's get our egg and water in here. Read recipes before you make them. I think that's what I'm learning today. read the full thing before you start making a video on them. If you're a long-time viewer of the channel, you know I fucked up beating an egg last time, so let's see if I can do it better while talking about Back to the Future 2. So Back to the Future 2 is a very interesting movie in the fact that it was never supposed to be made. The original ending for Back to the Future was just meant to be a sort of like fun kind of thing, you know? It was never meant to be taken seriously like we're making a sequel. It was just meant to be for funsies. That's why so much of Back to the Future 2 just immediately tries to throw away the setup for Back to the Future, like getting Jennifer out of there and everything. But that doesn't mean that the sequel is bad. It's unnecessary, but it's not bad. It's more like continuing adventures of the characters rather than just an unnecessary sequel. Seeing the future is really, really interesting. It's just really cool to see what they thought it would be like in 30 years. And you know what? It's still really, really cool, especially since a lot of the future stuff is kind of practical, like the self-lacing shoes and stuff. The other thing is, since they knew they were getting a sequel, they decided to up the ante when it comes to the long takes and special effects. So since the majority of the movie is them looking at themselves in the future and the past, they still wanted to keep the long takes while still incorporating two different versions of the actors in the same scene. And even to this day, I don't think movies have really done it better than this. How much the camera is moving in order to get the shots perfectly lined up is incredible. It is a masterful piece of filmmaking that improves on the stuff that the first movie did before it. And it's the thing that makes this movie stand out a bit more from just your regular sequel schlock. It's the fact that the art of filmmaking is so masterfully on display through those long takes. It's literally the DP, the editor, and the actors all sort of flexing how awesome they can be with this kind of budget. Because everybody's role needed to be perfect in order for those scenes to work, and they all pulled it off magically. That did it a lot faster than I thought it would. Well, this is more than the 10 inches it was telling us to do. Should I cut it in half? I'll just call that. And I'll call that. So it says I need to paint the egg mixture over this. Using a small pastry brush, paint a 1-inch border of the egg mixture around the perimeter of the egg pastry square. One at a time, fold over each egg wash edge to create an inch-wide double thickness border around the tart. Brush the egg mixture over the doubled edge. Use the tines with a fork to lightly prick the dough at half-inch intervals. This will prevent the bottom crust from puffing. You know, at least I don't have to touch the egg this time, because that's what set off my OCD in the last video. So anyway, Back to the Future 2. I would say the future segments are the cooler part of Back to the Future 2, but honestly, the past section, going back into the first movie, is the smartest thing it's the smartest idea I've ever seen for a sequel to do. The first movie is literally happening concurrently, so not only do they need to make sure they don't mess up the past, they need to make sure the first movie happens as well. I hope this is not too much of a border. Oh god. So I need to brush the egg mixture over this and then it. So, That's what they're asking, right? Did I fuck it up? Good enough. Why did I do a tart for this video series? Why did I pick this first? Literally only because I watched Back to the Future a few days ago. I picked this specifically because I watched Back to the Future. That was it. The next one, I just roll it over. So I'm assuming that half the people watching this video don't actually know. I have severe OCD. The main thing that does it is like stuff with texture. I can't handle sticky things mostly. There's a lot that like triggers me and a lot that like fucks with me a lot. But sticky things are the worst, which is why you can tell how much I am internally screaming in the original Captain Crunch video. But also, this doesn't help! I love the way eggs taste, I love what you can do with eggs. I hate touching eggs. So if you see me do weird things with my hands, it's 'cause egg! In case you didn't know, that Captain Crunch video where that's happening, that's a nightmare for me. When I say it's all over my fingers, that wasn't just like, ooh, look at the camera, oh. That is me internally freaking out because I have egg all over it and I don't know what to do because it's so sticky and my body is screaming as if I just got shot. Hi, my name's Leo and I take the fun out of every video behind the scenes. So we got our borders done. I desperately need to wash my hands now for 2 minutes probably. Time to fill. Sprinkle a quarter cup of Parmesan cheese evenly over the fork-marked pastry base. Spread the cooled onion filling over the cheese and scatter the artichoke hearts and olives on top. Oh yeah, this recipe called for olives, but fuck olives. Unless you are Olive the dog, you have no right existing. Olives always bring down the flavor and how good the dish is. I've chosen to not have olives. I already don't like artichokes. I hate olives. So it says a quarter cup of Parmesan cheese. Where the hell is my quarter cup? I guess I'm just gonna have to fill half of my half cup, because that's how math works, right? Surprise! I made too many onions. So let's get some onion and thyme into here. And it says some of the artichoke hearts. Oh, it said to quarter them, and these are definitely not quartered. Oh, so it's literally cutting it into quarters. I thought it was like a special thing. That's apparently it. This is gonna be terrible. I gotta add these into it. This already, I feel like I put too much on here already. I feel like this is too much onion. I'm gonna remove some of the onion. This is the weirdest cookbook. Onions taste good though. Like, is that it? Does it just want that? There are no pictures in this cookbook. I feel like every cookbook needs to have a picture so I know how badly I failed at the end of it. Time to bake. Carefully lift the tart by the edges of the foil, slide it on the hot cookie sheet, and bake for 30 minutes until puffy, crisp, and golden brown. Garnish with chopped thyme. Well, this is my whole Saturday. Another important rule of the kitchen: clean while you cook, so there's a lot less to do later. Alexa, set an alarm for half an hour. That's the most important part of this.
30 minutes, starting now.
Thank you. So Back to the Future 2 wasn't the only sequel to Back to the Future. Back to the Future 3 was made in conjunction with Back to the Future 2, so in doing so, they actually put a lot of foreshadowing of Back to the Future 3 in 2. The first Back to the Future is excellently well-rounded because everything that gets set up at the beginning of the movie pays off by the end of it. Whereas for Back to the Future 2 and 3, they set up a lot of stuff for Back to the Future 2 that doesn't pay off until Back to the Future 3. When Marty's in the Cafe 80s, they play Wild Gunman, showing off his Western skills with a revolver. And in the alternative 1985, Biff says his favorite movie is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, a Western starring Clint Eastwood, all of which pays off immensely once you get to Back to the Future 3 in the future. Now, Back to the Future 3 is kind of weird. It definitely has to deal with third movie syndrome, but I'm not gonna say it's bad. Well, is it the worst of the trilogy? Yeah. Is it bad? No. Whereas Back to the Future 1 feels like the sort of perfect movie, Back to the Future 2 and 3 definitely feel like more adventures following the characters, still done excellently. They do a lot of the same effects work that they did in Back to the Future 2 with 3, but this time incorporating more movement. Usually when they had long takes that involved the actors talking to each other, usually the camera wasn't moving. There were maybe one or two moves for the camera, but nothing really substantial. Back to the Future 3 almost always has the camera constantly in motion, with characters going through the background, characters walking through the frame, handing stuff to other characters. It is such a flex of filmmaking back in the 80s that you can't help but be impressed by what they're doing. It definitely feels like a love letter to Westerns, and I gotta say, it's fun. It has that aesthetic, it has that pacing, it has such a great Western story. It's just a weird way to end this trilogy. I honestly feel like Back to the Future 2 and 3 should have been swapped, if that makes sense. Just because of the premise of Back to the Future 2 going through the first movie sounds like the natural kind of endgame for this series. It's why 1885 just feels sort of completely out of left field. So if you've never seen Back to the Future before, I would highly recommend it, because like I said, it's one of the best movies ever made. It may all seem like stuff that you can do today relatively easily, but the fact that it was done in the 80s, on film, with the amount of movement that they do, it's still impressive even today. Should actually check the Tart, shouldn't we? Holy shit, they puffed up. I wasn't expecting that. Maybe this will work after all. Those aren't looking half bad. Maybe I could have put more onion. I don't know how to fill the time until the pastry's done. More wine. There's also a Back to the Future cartoon show from the I think the early 90s. And it's just Marty and Doc Brown and his family going on adventures through time. And I haven't actually seen it, and I want to. So if you happen to know how to watch it, please let me know, because that's the one Back to the Future thing I haven't seen. And the Back to the Future TV show is really interesting because you know who got his start on there? Bill Nye the Science Guy. At the end of every episode, they did a sort of science experiment that was hosted by Christopher Lloyd as Doc Brown. Bill Nye was pretty much just the guy who would do it. I assume he was also the one that came up with the experiments themselves. It's really interesting that that man owes his TV career to Back to the Future of all things. And it makes me really want to watch it because it seems fun. I love old cartoons. Can you tell I'm just wasting time? The tarts are ready. Oh, fuck. Fuck, these don't look half bad. So I may have doubted myself. I don't think these turn out that bad. These look like actual edible things. I wasn't expecting this. I expected this thing to just be a mess of bullshit that wouldn't work. I definitely could have kept all the onions in there. Shit, I didn't know it would puff up this much. These look kind of good. Maybe they were actually in there for a bit too long. I guess we just gotta taste them to see how it actually ended up. Woo! I mean, it's not bad. I mean, it's definitely a weird thing to make, I would say. If somebody told you, hey, I have a pastry that has artichoke and onion, would you trust it? No. But I'm telling you, you should trust the guy. It's just caramelized onions and an artichoke. So if you like artichoke dip, this is like a tart version of it. Yeah, the cookbook says to garnish with chopped thyme, but uh-oh, I guess I'm out of time. This was extremely bizarre, but I like it. I don't know what a tart is. I don't even know if these are technically correct tarts, but it's good. And I can tell you another thing, olives would have ruined it, but this isn't a half bad recipe to try out yourself if you want to just make something fucking weird for your friends. Does it accompany Back to the Future well? It's weird and quirky like something Doc Brown would make. And I'm going in for seconds. Even this guy's been in the other room the entire time until I took it out. He didn't want to be here for the cooking process, but the instant I started eating, he got really, really interested. Would I recommend you make this? I don't know. This makes very little sense to me, but I dig it. What makes a tart a tart? Like, this isn't tart at all. This is very savory. It's just a bunch of onions and artichokes. And maybe a pastry that I burnt a little bit. But hey, if you have the ingredients lying around and you're just bored for the weekend, why not give it a shot? Drinking the wine that you're supposed to make this with too is also something I highly recommend. So that is the Traveling Through Time and Onion Tart. Do I recommend that you watch Back to the Future? Yes. As I said in this video itself, Back to the Future is easily one of the best movies ever made on a technical standpoint and just a writing standpoint. This movie is studied in film school for a reason, and the sequels, while not nearly as good as the original, really do stand out as some of the finest sequels ever made in Hollywood. It is easily one of the best trilogies ever made. It tells such a whole and complete story, despite not needing to be one. Even putting the conclusion of this story in the Wild West fits this weird kind of series. The technical aspects of this movie are incredible, even today, even more so today, I would say, because you know that they didn't have that many computer-generated effects in the past. Most of it was done using film, using whatever technology they had at the time. This movie was made in the 80s and it still has better special effects than movies made today. I don't know how to end this video. I'm rambling. My name is Leo. I just made a tart. Good night. If you want to see the last time I ventured into the kitchen, please click this video right over here where I try to cook with Captain Crunch. It doesn't go well. And while I have you here, if you want to see more regular reviews, click this playlist over here, and why not subscribe so you know whenever I post a new video. My name is Leo. I have wine. I made a tart. Good night.